The more that I learn about computers and technology, the more I understand how very little I truly know. Sure, I've done some of the nerd stuff. I've built a few PCs, I've edited some INI files, and I've ran some mods. I've sideloaded Kodi to Fire Sticks for coworkers back in the day. I've messed around with learning Python for a Raspberry Pi project years ago, and in my current career, I frequently have to mess with SQL databases. And all of that is to say nothing about the times where I have borked my own systems by accidentally downloading ransomware or other malignant software and had to figure out how to fix them on my own simply because I was too broke to pay someone to help me back when it happened. But these are not bona fides. I know very little about how computers work on my own, and what little I've managed to troubleshoot or learn has always come from far more knowledgeable people on the internet who have graciously made their information public. I am a novice at best, and throughout this video, I am sure that my usage of certain terms will only make this more obvious. I am nothing more than a layman. But I will say this, and I'm pretty sure that plenty of you can relate to it. When compared to most of my coworkers, friends, and family, I am the resident computer nerd that they all know. And when one of them encounters a problem, I'm usually the one that they text or call. And that is because to most normal people, computers are mysterious boxes of technology that operate on magic so opaque and arcane that only the most educated, dedicated, or autistic can only hope to understand. Numbers and math go in, and somehow a digital cowboy comes out. Or as in the case of my office, if you know how to connect to a network printer using a basic run command, you are a god among men. And because of this disconnect that most people seem to have surrounding the intricacies of computer science, something of a mythological status has been given to those that have mastered the field. And they are usually seen not only as titans of industry, but in some bizarre cases, modern-day philosophers. But then, there are the people who take their understanding and are able to pierce the veil and make technologies do things that they were never supposed to do.
I've been hacked! Help me, I've been hacked! You didn't say the magic word.
According to IBM, computer hacking can best be defined as the use of unconventional or illicit means to gain unauthorized access to a digital device, computer system, or network. And while the classic example typically involves cybercriminals exploiting security vulnerabilities in order to break into secure networks in order to steal data, there are definitely far more benign or even helpful use cases. Have you ever rolled back device firmware in order to load homebrewed software? That counts. Or if you are my age, running GameShark on the PS2. You know, using third-party software to alter specific memory addresses within the software to run all sorts of cheats. Technically, this counts too. But of course, the stuff I'm talking about right now, this stuff is all child's play. In 2017, the American credit bureau Equifax was breached. The institution was running an outdated version of its Apache Struts web application framework. Default usernames and passwords allowed the hacker group to gain access to Equifax's automated consumer interview system, and once inside, the group installed backdoors to gain remote access to the entire network and scan seized databases. And for 76 days, hackers gained full access to the personal data of approximately 148 million people. Social security numbers, birth dates, personal addresses, and other sensitive information was all compromised. 3 years later, the US government indicated that it was members of China's military or the People's Liberation Army that were responsible for this attack. But these claims were of course denied by Beijing. And for us gamers, in 2011, an unidentified hacking group using a combination of phishing techniques or sending fraudulent communications in order to get key members of Sony to reveal information useful to gain network access, and SQL injection or structured query language injection in which code is forced into database software in order to gain access and control over its contents. And all of this was done in order to breach Sony's PlayStation Network and Cryosity services. This particular hack affected 77 million accounts and the personal details associated with them. And this of course led to a 23-day outage where users were unable to access any of the web-based services associated with PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Portable consoles. And really it is this broad scope of what a computer hack can actually be that has made the term something of a catch-all when it comes to larger societal understanding. If society at large already fails to understand the breadth and depth of computers and their applications, and people already think of IT knowledge as some sort of black magic, then hackers have developed something of a reputation as technological black mages, especially when it comes to the realm of entertainment, and more specifically how Hollywood and video games portray both hackers and the act of hacking. Whether we are talking about the whole weird science plot beat where two nerds are able to use electrodes, a Barbie doll, and a computer to create their dream girl, whatever the fuck this scene and technobabble from NCIS is actually supposed to be.
It's moving too fast.
Oh, this is not good.
Or my personal favorite, that bit in 1981's Evil Speak where nerd Stanley Coopersmith is able to use a computer to summon Satan. I mean, it's mental as fuck. I understand that these are extreme cases and highlights of how ridiculously hacking is often portrayed in movies, but the point stands. More often than not, hacking is a stand-in for technological magic. And even when it is portrayed as something kind of sensible like war games, Mr. Robot, or hackers,
Hack the planet! Hack the planet!
even in these more grounded representations of this pursuit, there's always the need to toss around technical sounding jargon that only serves to betray some level of ignorance on the behalf of the writers, or to dazzle the viewer with sophisticated interfaces that are anything but realistic. And that is because, in the real world, hacking more often than not looks like this.
Step 1. Spoof his number so it looks like he's calling from inside the company, and then call tech support.
Hello?
Hi, this is Ken. How may I help you?
I was wondering if you can take a look at a website I'm trying to get to. It's for a big customer thing I'm working on for Monday, and I can't seem to get to the website from my computer.
Hours of staring at a terminal interface, plugging in commands, scanning, running executables, and learning all of the nuanced relationships between different network protocols and the human beings that act as system admins. Again, I'm nothing more than a novice in understanding what most of the words I've just said actually mean, at least on anything more than a conceptual level, but Hollywood writers and directors, they either have even less of a grasp on this shit than even an idiot like me, or they just opt to suspend disbelief for the sake of entertainment. And video games are no better. Using a Pipe Dreams inspired interface to manually override vending machines in BioShock,
Kill your cravings at the circus of values!
Batman using what is ostensibly a twin-stick gamepad to line of sight his way into encrypted password-controlled panels in Arkham Knight, or all of the straight-up technomancy that becomes possible in the Watch Dogs games once you've hacked your way into CTOS. Again, most of the time, hacking is treated as a stand-in for Force-like mechanics to boost up the power fantasy. Real bypass the mainframe and tighten up the graphics kind of shit. But not all games are like this. After all, game design requires quite a bit more understanding of programming and console commands than any movie writer or director would reasonably possess. And because of this marriage of technology and the arts, there have been quite a few games that dive into the programming and hacking side of interactive software over the years, or at the very least represent certain concepts in fun and interesting ways. Plug-in chips in Nier Automata being represented as a memory stack, or removing 2B's OS chip resulting in an alternate ending to the game, pretty much everything in Quadrilateral Cowboy, which takes the whole idea of entering command prompt and applies it to a puzzle adventure setting, or smaller indie titles like Uplink or Midnight Protocol, which are rooted heavily in the whole internet protocol side of information technology. But in my opinion, no game has ever married both sides, the Hollywood entertainment first model, and the practical grounded nature of physically making you feel like you're actually learning how to hack, better than the subject of today's video. And that is, of course, Fractal Alligator's 2015 release of Hacknet. Developed by lone programmer Matt Trobiani, Hacknet can best be boiled down to a hacking simulator. Sure, it has some movie magic to it, but during development, Trobiani approached this project with one important thing in mind.
Actually design the game with the core idea not being to try and make something fun, but to try and make you feel like a hacker. Like, that's number one priority.
And just from the second that you fire this game up, you can immediately see the steps he took to sell this illusion and fantasy. You create an account for the machine that you're running, and then boot up dialog floods your screen as you load into the fictional Hacknet kernel. In this game, you play as an unnamed hacker, and your perspective is locked in front of your machine, similar to 2015's Her Story by Sam Barlow. And watching as your machine winds its way through the startup process goes a long way into establishing this setup. But right away, the realism is muddied with a Hollywood thriller twist. Upon login, you are greeted with an automated failsafe message from someone who refers to themselves simply as Bit.
Hi. This is strange. Stranger than I expected. I guess I'm supposed to write this in past tense, though I hardly feel like admitting it's over. My name is Bit, and if you're reading this, I'm already dead.
And after this message has been displayed, the player is released into the user interface that they will be using to actually experience this title. A Unix-like operating system that Linux users will immediately feel at home with. And if you've ever used Terminal or Command Prompt, you will know exactly what this is. As far as setup is concerned, automated emails from the recently deceased Bit walk you through the tutorialization process. Here you are walked through the net map, which is a visual representation of all the possible machines that you can connect to. You are shown that you can scan any machines that you have admin privileges over in order to locate any other computers that they may be connected to. And once you have been introduced to the elements that you can use your mouse to quickly interact with, terminal commands begin to filter in on the right side of your screen. And really, this is where we are introduced to the actual game. Here in this terminal, this is where the game is played through a series of both common commands and fictional scripts and software that are here to let you do your simulated hacking. Probe is the first command that you are introduced to, which probes whichever machine you are connected to and scans it for open ports for different processes running on a connected computer. And it should be stated that whether you choose to use your graphical interface and click on any basic command or decide to type in manually, no matter what you choose, the terminal will always reflect whichever action you've taken. Early on, all ports are open in Hacknet and security is lax, but that is just to teach you your next most important command of port hack. In Hacknet, all roadblocks and problems have a fairly easy to use solution. This is not a game about teaching you the nuance of code or how to actually manipulate computers on a bit-by-bit level, but instead you are always given scripts and executables that can handle the job for you. And whenever you run port hack on a system with open ports, you enter the command and the script starts the process of elevating your privileges on the given machine until it is able to present you with admin usernames and passwords. Don't ask me how realistic this is, because I couldn't find any real-world examples of software that functions exactly like this, but whenever you run port hack, you are met with a real
I'm in
kind of moment. And from here you are introduced to more common commands and functions. You can look through any directory on any system you control, reading .txt files, search for stored executables, peruse saved IRC chat text, look at the logs on any given machine, which record every action that you've taken on each computer, and use the aforementioned scan command to look for networked machines. And to do all of this, you use commands like rm to remove any unwanted files or logs, cd to change directories, or even scp to securely copy files to your original machine. And lucky for me, all of these commands are always available for reference by typing in the help command, or using the tab key to autocomplete any syntax that you may have already started. Depending on your familiarity with computers, this is either going to come across as entirely too granular for you to want to fuck with, or possibly even oversimplified if you have any degree of real-world experience. But most of these functions are very much real tools that exist almost universally. For me playing Hacknet, there definitely was a moment of having to get my bearings, because I'm not someone who regularly spends time in terminal. But after just a few moments of routine repetition, I found myself firing off these basic commands and auto-completing them in no time. And again, I think all of this is incredibly important to Trobiani's make you feel like a hacker ethos. And even this early on, I couldn't help but be impressed with this single Australian developer's work. The interface has this very slick and stripped down feel. Sure, the graphics used to represent port hack and the net map interface look a little Hollywood, but by having each action you need to take being linked to a series of very real mouse and keyboard clicks and clacks, and the slight retrowave quality of the understated soundtrack in these early moments really does start to make you feel like you are being given the tools and underlying logic to eventually hack the planet. Seriously, these early moments, not bad for one Aussie creator. And real quick, while we're on the topic of solo Aussie creators, do me a favor and check out friend of the channel, Jacob the Dabbler's YouTube page. This is a dude that, dabbles in plenty of things like streaming video games, making rad music videos using horror film imagery, and taking on self-imposed challenges such as shotgunning 6 beers without throwing up, and eating burgers and drinking malt liquor under various bridges. The dude rules, and you should check him out.
I forgot to exhale before I did that, and I just swallowed so much air.
But back to the video. Once you've gotten the basics down, Bit walks you through the last steps of the tutorial, one that has him alerting you to the fact that this current build of Hacknet was never supposed to be released, and as such it has an auto tracker installed by default, one that you are definitely going to want to remove before you get found out. And then the final step, which is manually killing the tutorial program. And really, I think it was in this moment where I was more or less hooked. This breaking of the fourth wall in a way that just made so much sense. You're on a computer and there's a program running in the background which is teaching you how to actually use the thing. But now you've learned all the basics, and now you want to end this process and dive into the net unburdened. But in order to do so, you are taught one final set of commands to dedicate to memory. PS, which lists every current process running on your machine with a corresponding process ID number, and kill, which is used to terminate whichever process ID you plug in with it. And with the press of the enter key, you are now in the game proper. And from here, things only get more and more technical and more complicated and dramatic from a storytelling perspective. Bit's failsafe continues to issue some basic tasks: stealing your first executable, SSH crack, a script that targets closed ports that are used for creating a SSH or secure shell by establishing a secure encrypted connection between client and server side. And this executable, in theory, it is somehow able to break the encryption in this connection in order to open the user's SSH port. I mean, right on. But from a gameplay perspective, this is the introduction of a mechanic that becomes more and more complicated as time goes on. And that is the introduction of closed ports on a probed computer. And from this moment on, the process of gaining admin controls becomes a sequence of probing, identifying locked ports, and then running the corresponding script in order to crack it, and then running port hack. And as you advance in this narrative, systems only become more and more secure. Where a machine may only have one closed port in the beginning, you quickly encounter machines that have 2, 3, 4, or 5 as you progress. And each port is responsible for different protocols. After the secure shell port, you will encounter ports for file transfer protocol, SMTP or simple mail transfer protocol, which is the standard for sending emails, ports for hypertext transfer protocol or HTTP, and yeah, that's the one for the web browsers, and ports for SQL, which again is used for databasing. And each of these ports has its corresponding attack. FTP bounce.exe, which has some real-world significance as it is an attack that allows hackers to use an FTP server as a proxy and target a specified port on the client side. SMTP overflow, which again is a real vector of attack where a hacker can use a program to write more data than a computer's memory buffer is designed to hold, and then this can lead to a crash or allow an attacker to inject malicious code. And then there is the web service worm, which can be used to crack the HTTP port. And even if you're a novice like me, you've probably heard of computer worms, which are programs that replicate themselves and spread through infected networks in order to scan, corrupt, or modify files on targeted systems. And again, all of this feeds into Trobiani's design philosophy. You may not be the programmer here, you may not fully understand the mechanics that are being referenced, but you sure as shit feel like you did something hackery when you have identified your vector of attack and then manually punched in the commands to run your programs and compromise targeted machines. Along the way, you will encounter systems that are running proxies, which are intermediary systems or even routers that handle requests on behalf of the user, but in gameplay terms, these can be bypassed by running shells on other computers that you're connected to. And I'm not sure exactly how all that works, but in terms of how it plays, you basically just have several IP addresses associated with your main machine, and then you use an overflow command in order to bypass the proxy. In my limited research for this video, I couldn't find any real-world applications of this technique, at least as it is presented in this game, but as a gameplay mechanic, it is all about adding an additional order of operations to your attack. You have to get rid of a proxy before you can run port hack, so you have to shell a few computers to make bar go down quick. And then there are firewalls, which effectively act like barriers on the internet which can allow or block predetermined data packets in the real world. And while real-world examples of exploits such as phishing attacks, remote access methods, or even manipulating system admins to bypass firewalls have been well documented, here in Hacknet, you just run the analyze command a few times until a cipher can be cracked, and then you use the solve command with the returned passcode. This is probably the most Hollywood tool at your disposal, but when you come across a machine that is running a proxy server, is firewall protected, has 4 or 5 closed ports, and tracking software that puts a timer on your window of attack before your IT has been traced, erased and your attack terminated, all while you are trying to remove all the logs of your intrusion before you disconnect. In these moments, you are so busy clicking and clacking, looking at how much of your limited memory is allocated to processes that are currently running, loading up your next command, and paying attention to your order of operations to truly care if it is a one-to-one representation of real-world cybercrime. And it is in those moments where this game just feels so good to play. As the attacks become more and more sophisticated, music by composer Remy Gaejo, who is the dude behind the synth metal project The Algorithm, kicks in, and man, if you haven't listened to the album Brute Force by The Algorithm, you're just fucking up. Go listen to it now, it's a personal favorite of mine. And then there are sequences scored to Carpenter Brute, who made his video game debut with some of the best music featured in Hotline Miami 2. And absolute bangers by Cinematic play out while you are blasting commands at a rapid pace. When everything is coming together, the music, the time limits, the underlying logic, and the rapid fire pace fueling your problem solving, each keystroke feels amazing as it is all in service of making you feel grounded in this experience. If you spend time reading and watching long-form essays on video games, which, I mean, you probably have if you are still watching this video, you may have come across the phrase kinesthetics in video games, which is an overcomplicated way of discussing the physical sensations and movements that players experience while playing and how those movements translate to the actions taken within the game world. And, I mean, all of that is just fancy speak for, does it feel good when I push button? Locking in a headshot with the AWP in Counter-Strike feels good every time because of the flick of the wrist required, coupled with the booming gunshot. Landing a Dragon Punch cancelled into a Focus Attack Dash cancelled Ultra in Street Fighter 4 always feels amazing because of the read and the situational awareness that gives way to complex muscle memory as you scatter off complex inputs in an instant. And in Hacknet, every single time I queued commands with a quick combination of keystrokes and tabbed autocompletes, hitting that enter key to lock in my attack always felt so damn good. And that is because the simulation was always just grounded enough, the feedback was always instantaneous, and the flashing UI coupled with the pulsing synths always kept everything feeling like it was a high-stakes version of time-based computing. And I don't know, man, it's just fucking rad. And if you haven't checked this game out, I cannot recommend it enough. But those are just the mechanics and how you interact with them. And they would be nothing without Trobiani's amazing scenario writing. It is one thing to just point you towards machines and let you run your routines. But having the mystery surrounding Bit's disappearance thrusts this game into something where there are instantly stakes. Sure, the game warns you up front that what you are doing is illegal in this world, as gaining unauthorized access to other machines in and of itself is a crime, but someone has clearly been killed very recently in this pursuit. And while it is never outright stated, I wonder if you are supposed to be someone who knew this Bit guy on some personal level, because it seems people you come in contact with throughout this story, people who also have questions surrounding Bit's sudden radio silence, are also running the Hacknet kernel, and they seemingly haven't also tripped Bit's failsafe. So either you are the only one who randomly got this communication, or you are some sort of elite hacker that for some reason also needs to be tutorialized, or Bit knew that you would be the one to crack the code. And just by Occam's razor, I'm going to assume that it is the latter. But as you blindly follow in the dead man's footsteps, you are eventually put in contact with a hacker group called Entropy, and it is here where you kind of become a gun for hire, even though no money is ever discussed or outright exchanged. So maybe you're just doing it for the love of the game. But despite these reasonably sized plot holes, once you've aligned with this faction, you start taking on some pretty interesting missions. And these are where the game again grounds itself to some very real feeling scenarios, or at the very least ones that make sense within the logic of this world. Whether it is targeting a news site's message board in order to cripple it from spreading news that paints Entropy in a bad light, hacking a server that stores app saves for a clicker game in order to delete the top scorer's profile so he can be returned to the starting point in order to exert his dominance over the application once again, or being contacted by high school administrators in order to find out if their IT guy has been spying on and having inappropriate contact with students. These scenarios run the gamut of petty digital vandalism to fairly noble gray hat operations, and combing directories for game saves, deleting system configs to brick servers, and sleuthing through a system in order to find documentation that could leak passwords is all the kind of stuff that makes you feel like you are really doing something in the context of this game's universe. And it only gets better and better as the tasks become more and more complex. Whether it is the fact that all fictional EOS phones and tablets have a default admin username and password that can be exploited, But in order to get access to them, you have to first get onto a target's home network and then run an application that scans for connected phones in order to find secured files that have been created on the mobile device, or being contacted by a shadowy military contractor to find out if an employee has been doing any personal work and research on a work device that may or may not present concrete proof of extraterrestrial existence. The game evolves from not only being a mechanical problem-solving simulation, but also one where you are exploiting the messy nature of the human beings behind each computer screen. But nothing, and I mean nothing, tops the moment where Entropy tasks you with tracking down and removing any sensitive files that may have been illegally obtained by an aggressive hacker. And that is because this is the moment where you find out that you are not the only predator on the net. Because after you complete your mission, this hacker figures out where your system is and he fucks your shit up. Deleting your system configurations and crashing your system. And I think that this was the moment where Hacknet felt the most real. Your system wants to boot, but with all the files gone, it can't really do its job. And it is here where you have to use terminal without any type of graphical interface other than command line in order to connect to one of your networked machines, copy its system config, and then reboot your system remotely. And it's honestly a Metroid type of moment where you are cruising along feeling all powerful and shit, and then you get owned and all of the wind is taken out of your sails. It's good shit. And rebooting your system with a copied configuration completely changes all of the settings and visuals of your machine. It is just a moment where the danger of this type of pursuit feels kind of real, at least by the logic of this world. And of course, getting revenge is clearly the next step. And you do that by checking the logs on your machine, discovering that this hacker, Nyax, wasn't too careful about hiding his tracks, getting into his machine, downloading some new executables, and then returning the favor by deleting his system config. And if you are observant, you can even snag a copy of your original configuration while you're at it. And from this moment on, the stakes just go up and up. You enter an uneasy alliance with Nyax after he realizes that you have enough skill to hang with him. He puts you in contact with a message board of other high-level hackers, and completing projects here gets you invited into a group known as CSEC. And while this group isn't too different from Entropy, as their contracts also vary from the juvenile to the far more serious, the tools that you gain from doing jobs for CSEC, the complexity of their missions, and eventually the consequences of some of the contracts that you have to take on are far more intense than anything that you've seen thus far. From hacking medical records to find out if someone is faking a condition, to changing someone's GPA in an international academic database, to the eventual loading test firmware into a patient's pacemaker in order to euthanize someone who has been kept on life support against both their own and their family's wishes. Things start not only to feel more ethically gray, but the steps required to get each job done becomes downright dizzying until your netmap interface looks like internet spaghetti. Seriously, cracking a medical database, emailing files to yourself to track down IP addresses of a pacemaker's manufacturer, scanning that server's connections to hack your way into an asset server, downloading software that will allow for you to crack a port in the pacemaker, and then tracking down the company that designed its firmware in order to install it. These are steps upon steps that require reading emails, .txt files, recognizing what is useful to you and what is just bogus, and then manipulating two-factor authentication. And I have to admit, as things continued to spiral out and become more and more tangled, there were moments where I was constantly having to reference previous commands in the simulated terminal or go back to my character's home PC to read over stolen files. And I think this is the closest that this game really gets to making you feel like a proper hacker. It's one thing to run scripts and own a system, and it is a completely different thing to sit behind your monitor and try to understand the logic and formulate your own plan of attack based upon the facts and your previous experience. And while I won't go ahead and spoil the ending, I will say that as you do these jobs, you are eventually contacted by one of Bit's friends, a hacker named Vapor, who you work with directly to figure out the whys and hows surrounding his untimely death. And when you do figure out what is going on, it is all surrounding an ethical dilemma that a talented hacker found himself in while doing contract work for a software conglomerate. and when Bit backed out, the corporation clearly had a problem with that. It's some real Ed Snowden type shit, and it definitely hits with the appropriate weight that you would hope it would. Hacknet is unlike anything that I've ever played before. It simulates and at least attempts to demystify incredibly complicated subject matter. And while of course it has to be sweeping in its generality and it has to dumb certain things down in order to make them more accessible, I did feel like my understanding of certain concepts surrounding cybersecurity were at least pushed in the right direction. On one hand, by the game itself and the tasks that it made me do, and then by giving me a basic vocabulary that allowed for me to research further on my own. And then during a DLC mission that was integrated directly into the main game's campaign. Basically, you download the Labyrinth DLC, which has its own mini campaign with a new subplot, dope new music by the Algorithm side project, Home, and Ogre Sound, and an emphasis on tackling group hacks complete with an IRC analog that allows for your team members to chat with one another throughout their progress. And all of this is surfaced to the player as yet another contract that you can take on while you are working for either Entropy or CSEC. But because of the variability of when you actually play this mission during the main game, Labyrinth gives you new tools, some of which are tweaks on existing ones, but others are clunky scripts that continue to hog memory after completing their job, requiring that you manually kill their process after the corresponding port has been cracked, or even the secure sockets layer Trojan, which has to be used in sequence with a previously cracked port and makes for a complicated command string that you have to become efficient at hammering out. But within this campaign, there is a moment that kind of mirrors Hacknet's big moment. Just like it was in the main game, there is a moment where you get owned by another hacker during the Labyrinth DLC. But instead of just having your configuration blasted, Labyrinth breaks the fourth wall, crashing your system so bad that one of your team members has to crash you to your own physical computer, which they say in-game is the virtual machine that you are running everything on. You, the player, the real human playing Hacknet, have to crash your very real computer, the one that you are using to play the video game Hacknet, and then you have to use terminal on your system in order to navigate the Hacknet files and then delete a .dll file that has been flagged as the thing corrupting your video game computer. And when I was able to take my video game skills and then apply them to my very real computer, I couldn't help but think, yeah, fuck yeah, man. Hacknet is one of those rare games that sets out to do something very specific, something that almost no developers would even be interested in, and knocks it out of the fucking park. And even though there are little things that I could complain about, like one, once you understand all the commands available to you and their underlying logic, your attacks can start to feel pretty samey. And two, but this is far more complicated and nuanced towards my own personal experience with the game, and it might actually be a sign of how much I liked Hacknet more than anything, but I do feel like it might actually be worth talking about, so I'll just get right into it. I played Hacknet originally on my M4 chip MacBook Pro, and for whatever reason, the current build of Hacknet is incredibly unstable on that system. Like, would hang up every 15 to 20 minutes, making it so that I would have to force quit multiple times during a single play session unstable. And while I was initially fine to keep jumping back in, Hacknet's save system is less than ideal, making it so that I would have to repeat certain missions in their entirety at times, all while hoping that my game wouldn't crash again. And this was a frustrating mess, but because of whatever is wrong with my brain, it did make me want to play this game faster and more efficiently, not only because of the stakes put upon me by the game, but also because of the very real threat of another crash borking my progress. And for whatever reason, and I haven't really even begun to try and understand it, mostly out of frustration, the Labyrinth DLC was not playing nice with my M4 Max download of Hacknet. I read enough online to find out that other users were having very similar problems, and although I did not get to the bottom of it, I decided to bust out my old i9 MacBook Pro and see if the game would run better on Silicon. And it did. Didn't crash once. Clean install, clean experience, had to repeat a few missions to restore my progress, but I was able to have a much better experience this time around. So if you are playing on Mac, which I know is far less than ideal already, play on an Intel chipset if you can. But of course, play on PC, I mean, that much should be obvious. But because of the nature of this game and because of my own hard-headedness, running Hacknet and getting footage for this video became an exercise in troubleshooting and working with different hardware configurations. And if that isn't a real life imitating art moment, I don't know what is. And Bizarrely, it felt so in line with the very core of what Hacknet is that I can't even say that this game not running correctly the first time, it didn't negatively impact my enjoyment of the game in the slightest. And in some fucked up way, it might have even made the experience slightly better. This game fucking rules. Long live Hacknet, long live Matt Trobiani. If you have made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching. It is always greatly appreciated. And if you liked the video, please consider dropping a like, comment, or subscribing to the channel, as all of those things help far more than you know. And if you are super into what I'm doing here, please consider becoming a member of the channel. This was a hard script for me to write, as I often felt like I was in over my head explaining some of the more technical sides of what makes Hacknet special. But feel free to flame me in the comments if I sounded like an idiot. But it is still very cool that something that was meant to entertain got me to learn, read, and become far more interested in something that I've always kept a little bit of distance with. And if you have had any experiences like this, playing a game that led you to doing your own research and learning about different subject matter, I'd love to read about it in the comments. That's it for this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, you're all beautiful people, and I hope you have a great day.